She never spoke a word, but her silence screamed secrets no one dared to ask. In a bustling hospital filled with voices, Nadia's quiet presence was almost invisible, until one man decided to listen. Nadia was a young woman of 23, with eyes that held 1,000 untold stories. She came from a small, dusty village far from the bustling city where she now lived. She worked as a cleaner in an old, crowded hospital that smelled of antiseptic and tired hope. Every morning, before dawn, Nadia made her way through the dimly lit streets, careful to avoid the jeers and glances of those who looked down upon her. Nadia never spoke. Not because she couldn't, but because she chose silence. The world had been too harsh, too cruel for her to trust her voice again. People thought she was mute, or perhaps shy, but the truth was far more complex. Her silence was a shield, an invisible barrier to keep the pain locked away deep inside. Her days followed a strict rhythm. At 5 o'clock sharp, she arrived at the hospital, her worn shoes tapping quietly against the cold floor. She dusted the hallways, scrubbed the floors, and wiped down the patient rooms with meticulous care. Often, she was the first person a patient saw in the morning and the last at night. Without a word, she brought water to the thirsty, comforted trembling hands, and sometimes just sat quietly beside those who had no one else. Despite her tireless work, Nadia's wages were meager. The hospital administration saw her as invisible, a shadow that swept away dirt but deserved little else. Still, Nadia never complained. She held on to a fragile hope that someday her silence would not be her prison. One morning, everything changed. The hospital welcomed a new doctor, Dr. Shahbaz, a tall, stern man in his early 30s with sharp eyes and a commanding presence. He was known for his strict discipline and no-nonsense attitude. On his first day, as he hurried through the ward, he almost collided with Nadia, who was mopping near the entrance. "Watch where you're going," he snapped sharply. Nadia flinched, eyes dropping to the floor, her face flushing. She said nothing. Dr. Shahbaz paused. There was something about her, the way she seemed so small, yet carried an invisible weight. He shook his head and moved on, but his curiosity lingered. Days passed, and he found himself watching Nadia more closely. The hospital staff often ignored her, but Shahbaz saw the kindness in her quiet acts. The way she gently held a frightened child's hand, or how her eyes softened when she cared for an elderly patient. Her silence was like a song that only he could hear. One afternoon, unable to contain his curiosity, Shahbaz approached her during a break. "Why don't you speak?" he asked gently. Nadia's eyes darted around nervously. She swallowed hard, but said nothing. Shahbaz frowned, then decided to dig deeper. With permission from the hospital, he arranged for Nadia to have a medical checkup. When the tests came back, the doctors confirmed there was no physical reason preventing her from speaking. She could talk, but chose not to. Shahbaz sat beside Nadia quietly. "Your silence, it's not because you can't talk, is it?" he whispered. For the first time, Nadia's lips trembled, and a tear rolled down her cheek. She looked up and whispered, "I lost my family. My voice went with them." Shahbaz's heart ached. He listened as Nadia slowly began to share her story, a story of loss, loneliness, and strength. At 12, she had lost her parents in a tragic accident and had to raise her two younger siblings alone. The weight of responsibility crushed her spirit, and she buried herself in silence to survive. Moved by her story, Shahbaz made it his mission to help her not just survive, but to live fully again. He brought her warm clothes to replace her worn garments, encouraged her to take nursing classes, and treated her with dignity when others overlooked her. Slowly, Nadia's silence began to break. One day, after weeks of gentle encouragement, she smiled, a radiant, fragile smile that lit up the hospital corridor. Then, in a quiet moment, she spoke her first word to Shahbaz. "Thank you." That word, so simple yet so powerful, changed everything. As months passed, Nadia blossomed. She trained as a nurse, gaining skills and confidence. Her bond with Shahbaz grew into something deeper, built on respect, trust, and quiet affection. He admired her resilience, and she found in him a protector and a friend. Then came the twist that neither of them expected. One rainy evening, Shahbaz received a call. It was from a distant hospital in Nadia's village. Her younger brother had fallen seriously ill, and no one was able to care for him. Without hesitation, Shahbaz insisted they go immediately. They traveled through the stormy night, reaching the village as dawn broke. The once small village was now unfamiliar to Shahbaz, but Nadia moved with purpose. She entered the modest home, where her brother lay weak but alive. As she cared for him, Shahbaz noticed an elderly woman watching silently from the doorway. She was Nadia's grandmother, the one who had been left behind when the family tragedy struck years ago. The grandmother revealed a secret that Nadia never knew: her parents' death had not been an accident. It was caused by a wealthy landowner who wanted to seize their property. For years, the family suffered in silence, afraid to seek justice. Shahbaz, enraged by the injustice, vowed to help Nadia fight back. With his resources and influence, he gathered evidence and involved the authorities. The landowner was arrested, and the family's name cleared. This battle not only restored Nadia's family honor but also gave her the courage to fully reclaim her voice, both literally and figuratively. Returning to the city, Shahbaz surprised Nadia with a small home where she and her siblings could live with dignity and safety. He also surprised her with a proposal, not just to marry her, but to be partners in life and purpose. Nadia's eyes filled with tears as she said yes, not just to love but to a new beginning. Together, they started a foundation to support girls like Nadia, silent heroes who needed a chance to speak, to live, and to be seen. Their story became an inspiration, a reminder that sometimes the loudest voices come from the quietest hearts, and that kindness can shatter the deepest silences.